Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi shaykhna. Thank you.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa
Thank you for joining me for 6 episodes of Back to Basics. Inshallah, we can talk a lot more about our aqidah and the way we practice it in our daily lives.
Inshallah. Still feels very weird being so informal about everything. But
Yeah.
but no, see, I get it's a podcast, so you can be informal, but
Yeah.
it's the fact that the camera's still on. But it's like, oh wow, okay, so
Yeah.
why am I being so informal after all?
Yeah.
But I guess that's just the layout for sure.
I guess everyone works in their own unique way. So I think if this is how you feel comfortable, then I think it's the best way to portray the message to the viewers.
Yeah.
I wanted to focus especially on the individual self rather than the whole phenomenon of the aqidah or the religion or the masses, as we discussed earlier. How much emphasis does the religion or does our aqidah put on knowing yourself before knowing the religion and knowing your society? And how much emphasis does it put on the psyche and the mind and your mental health in particular?
Well, so of course, mental health is always something that mental health, given the fact that it is a new construct, it's sometimes difficult to project that back into the Islamic worldview as if what we're talking about is distinctly mental health. So the West tends to divide the human self into both the physical and the mental, and that's about it. Whereas Islam would state that no, there's also a spiritual side as well, which is sometimes interconnected with the mental, it's sometimes different too. But in regards to what's the importance of starting off there, well, we can look back to Najm al-Balagha, and we find that Amir al-Mu'mineen states that أول الدين معرفة. That's the first step in religion is cognizant awareness. Now, cognizant awareness of what? In order for me to even be cognizantly aware of my Lord, it would require for me to recognize that there's a distinction between me and my Lord in the first place.
Right.
You can't be cognizantly aware of something unless you realize that there is a thing external to yourself. And of course, the first step in that would be to recognize that you have a self. And this goes back to the saying of Amir al-Mu'mineen, which is one of my favorite narrations. Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu. Whoever knows his self knows his Lord. And as the Prophet states in a narration attributed to him in the very early and very authentic works, أعرفكم بنفسه أعرفكم بربه. But the one who knows himself the best knows his Lord the best as well. So clearly it's something which is very important in regards to knowing what is going on with religion. And one of the reasons for that is quite simple. If we view religion as essentially wayfaring, we often hear that this world is just a transient realm. It's like a transition. And one of my teachers in the Hausa, actually he got it from his father, who was Said Hadi. He states that you would always consider a man a fool if he was going for a transit in, say for example, Bali for one night. And he gets to the hotel room and he starts making himself too comfortable. He starts installing furniture, painting the walls, getting the best Wi-Fi. You'd think to yourself, what the hell are you doing? You know, you're here for a couple nights. And apparently Said Hadi says that the one who builds this realm and builds for this life is kind of like that man that does that for transit. You're only there for a couple days, so it's a temporary phase.
Sure.
But in order to know that you're only there for a little while, you need to know a little bit about yourself, and you need to know who's the person that's making the journey, and that of course is yourself. So yeah, of course it's quite important.
Absolutely. Can you touch on a bit more upon the idea of knowing your Lord through knowing yourself? How can we put that into practice in our daily lives?
Knowing your Lord through knowing yourself. Yeah, of course. I think there's numerous different angles which can always be inferred from looking at that narration, and that's why when you find that I've got several books which are written just as a commentary of this one narration, and they'll offer several different angles to it. But one of the things that I think certainly strengthens my confidence in this narration is the fact that if you are able to gain a mastery over yourself and your emotional self, and the ups and downs that the average human being goes through, then you'll be closer to your Lord than someone that doesn't. And let me give you an example for that. I have a very close friend who, when it comes to the theoretical side of Islam, he's an absolute genius. He can tell you why people suffer. He can explain to you all these philosophical dilemmas, such as why evil and suffering exists in the world. He can explain to you a lot about the theoretical side of Allah Azza wa Jal. But then he's the first to admit that when personal issues hit him in his personal life, so for example, if he's having issues at home, or if calamity strikes him, he's the first to get affected by it.
Yeah.
Now, why is it that theoretical knowledge he had that he's able to teach other people didn't help him? It's because it's theoretical knowledge. It's not actual real ma'rifah.
Yeah.
Whereas a person that has real ma'rifah and understands their emotional state, understands how to have mastery over that emotional state, they're going to truly understand what's going on. So it's not going to be a theoretical discussion where he knows that people suffer. It's going to be the fact that, well, suffering's happening right now, but I know practically I need to have tawakkul upon Allah. I know that I'm a limited human being, and I know that the only person that can get me out of this situation is Allah Azza wa Jal. And that's why you find that sometimes the Imams, when they would do da'wah, they would actually do so using a psychological angle. So I know that there's a few people out there who laugh at it and they go, well, that's not the smartest of responses now, is it? Well, actually it is, because it's the most practical of responses. So there's the classic case of the sailor coming along to Imam Sadiq and saying that, you know, tell me a little bit about your Lord, I don't believe in a God. And Imam Sadiq asks him, well, what do you do? He says, I'm a sailor. He says to him, has there ever been times where you're out at sea and something happens to your boat and you know that there's no one out there who could hear you, but deep down you know inside that there's a power beyond you which has the ability to help you in such a situation? And the man says, yes. And the Imam tells him, well, such a being is God. You see, the Imam's appealing to that psychological aspect, that deep down we know that because we are limited, that there's someone beyond us who can help us, who hears us, and is able to assist us in times of error. And that's what the Imam was appealing to, psychological.
So in your opinion, would that be the remedy or the cure to all psychological illnesses or issues that people face? Because a lot of times when someone's going through depression, someone's going through OCD, for example, a lot of our cultural teachings just say, oh, pray for him, or he's got a jinn inside of him.
Well, we've got this nasty tendency of either we dismiss it, and when someone tells you that, no, I genuinely have it and it's a real issue, we'll be like, oh, really? Are you insane? Like, we should lock you up then. And we don't realize that, no, listen, there's a whole plethora of different mental health issues, and a lot of people around us have been suffering from mental health issues since day one. It's just some people are better at coping with it than others.
Right.
Now, what we need to do is follow the advice of our maraja, and our maraja are very quick to point out that whilst there is a fear sometimes of things being jinn and supernatural, these are obviously exceptions to the rule. So in addition to seeking out religious help to get rid of a jinn or whatever, you should also consult a medical professional. Because these things are not things to be toyed around with, my brother. Some of these mental illnesses are due to a chemical imbalance in the brain.
Absolutely.
And you telling someone to read more dua or something, that's essentially providing a medical prescription. Now, no matter how pious you are, no matter how good your intentions are, can you imagine that if someone came back from a car crash and they were completely paralyzed and we'd be like, brother, it's okay, just read Salat al-Layl a little bit, you'll get better. I mean, on the Day of Judgment, I don't want to carry that responsibility and that burden.
Sure.
That I've told a brother to do something and he didn't get cured from it. You know, we live in what we call alam al-asbab, a world of causation. And so there's always cause and effect. And Allah Azza wa Jal teaches us to reach out for that cause. So, of course, we know that there's some Muslims that have objections with Shias and always saying that you just need to depend upon Allah while you're going to visit the Imams and what have you. Well, it's the same thing. We believe that if I'm thirsty, I don't make dua to Allah Azza wa Jal to quench my thirst. I go and drink water, believing that Allah has placed within the water a means to quench my thirst. Of course, it's different if I believe that the water independently of Allah Azza wa Jal quenches my thirst and doesn't depend upon Allah. That's complete heresy. But given that I know Allah has placed a means within this world to satisfy those particular problems I have, I likewise know that Allah Azza wa Jal has placed means to deal with and to assist with issues like mental health. Now, I'm not going to lie, I don't want to come across as a conspiracy theorist. There are certain issues within the industry of medicine which are concerning for some of us. But that doesn't mean I'm going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. People can consult people who are respectable medical professionals, and I'm sure they will advise them correctly, inshallah.
Inshallah. With regards to, like you said, the whole medical side to it, let's turn it on its heels and say, could the actual prescription of dua or Quran actually benefit people's mental well-being, and if so, to what extent and how could it affect it? Because you can always say, right, have some tablets, have some pills, and then they'll just control the.
I'm not actually advocating either.
Yeah.
I'm advocating a return to a medical professional who is best placed to advise people for this. I mean, the tablets and the pills are the most concerning thing for me because they definitely change the chemical process in one's brain.
Yeah.
But of course, there are certain circumstances where I believe that is necessary as well. So what we're saying is, in the same way I do not appreciate when lay people who are well-intentioned and street corner philosophers comment on aspects of religion and what should be done in fiqh. And I advocate a return to the experts who are, of course, the maraja. I'm not going to be a hypocrite and start advocating some self-help medicine either. I don't want to give the impression that I'm somehow an expert in mental health issues who's in a position to diagnose or provide a one-stop solution to people's mental health problems.
It's quite refreshing because it takes a lot for a scholar to come out and say that. A lot of scholars do come across as if they have all the answers and they have all the remedies to every ailment and an issue someone might be facing.
And perhaps I'm normally one of those scholars, and may Allah guide us all to a level of intellectual humility before the masses, because we will be held accountable for this in the Day of Judgment.
Absolutely. But with regards to Islam in particular, knowing the narrations we have that discuss about knowing yourself and knowing your Lord, does that differ from all the other religions, or do the other Abrahamic religions discuss the notion of knowing yourself and understanding your inner ruh before?
There is a degree of conflation sometimes on this issue, which is that this slogan of know yourself, know your Lord, does resemble a pre-Islamic trend, which has somewhat been, dare I say, an undercurrent within the Abrahamic faiths, known as Gnosticism. Gnosticism, of course, refers to a group of people that believe that through having this secret, embedded inner knowledge, we will be able to guide ourselves. If someone's going to read it in that light, I think that we're moving into very dangerous territory. And what I would say to such a person is stop while you're ahead, because we have principles from the Imams which are stipulated very clearly in our key texts, which advocate referring the ambiguous words back to the words which are clear-cut. So what I mean by that is, if I have a line which seems like it's Gnostic and follows the trend of Gnosticism, and yet my religion's clearly not a Gnostic religion, what I would do is interpret that Gnostic statement in light of the non-Gnostic statements, so that I'm not going too far off the ground with some crazy interpretation. And I would say that this is what needs to be done here. We need to read this statement in light of the other clear-cut narrations that Allah Azza wa Jal has given us an intellect. And that intellect is something that, if utilized, would guide us to the true path. But Allah Azza wa Jal has referred to the intellect as a hujjah, and that every human being needs to use the intellect. It's not a form of secret embedded knowledge that we're trying to unpack. Now, of course, we do believe that Allah Azza wa Jal gives people knowledge as a light that He places into the hearts of those who He wishes to give to. But such a thing never begins with a process of ignorance. And what I mean is, we don't advocate blind following or ignorant, what we call fideism. Fideism is, of course, the belief that, well, I don't really have proof for anything, but I'm just going to take a leap in the dark and advocate blind following. We don't advocate that at all.
Yeah. Fortunately, time is not on our side today.
That's fine.
But it was great discussing these notions.
Likewise, it was great to be a guest on the show.
And it's very important to first contemplate within ourselves before we go out there and advocating and spreading the teachings of our religion.
Of course.
But inshallah, we can carry on this discussion in future episodes. Thank you so much for your time.
Inshallah ta'ala. Thank you so much for having me once more.